Okay. Once again, I want to greet you all to another session of our webinar where we are going to be beginning a series of cybersecurity related topic, especially around cybersecurity career. And of course, the series that we are going to be having is titled "Let's Talk About Your Cybersecurity Career." And of course, as I mentioned, this is going to be a series of many recordings that will be coming your way. But for this particular session of Let's Talk About Your Cybersecurity Career Part 1, again, we are going to dive into the basics that, of course, many people or many those that are seeking for careers in cybersecurity always face and they always ask those questions all the time. So again, our vision statement is very simple. Our vision statement is to be the leading platform that empowers cybersecurity professionals at all levels with the knowledge, with the mentorship, and resources needed to navigate their cybersecurity careers, of course, drive innovation and safeguard the digital world. So again, it doesn't matter whether this is your first time or you're contemplating to start a career in cybersecurity or you are already in cybersecurity. It is always very important for you to actually remain updated or relevant in the market. So the goal of this platform, again, is not to really bring any specific skill set to you. As you say, we are training you in a particular career path, but again, the whole concept of having this discussion around your cybersecurity career is to enlighten you and to give you more knowledge on the different areas of cybersecurity, which may actually be of great help to empower you advance in your career. So again, one of the things that a lot of students have asked me or they will always ask is, I want to get into cybersecurity, but what is cybersecurity? And of course, it can be very frustrating and sometimes very tempting because whenever you listen to the news, you will hear about cybersecurity. And of course, cybersecurity is almost everywhere nowadays. And if you actually look at the job market, especially the job projection for the next, let's say, next 10 years, you will see that cybersecurity is one of those jobs that really is fast growing. But the question is sometimes what is cybersecurity? It can be very frustrating. Sometimes you will hear cybersecurity, sometimes you will hear information security, sometimes you will hear information technology. So basically, it becomes a little bit confusing. But well, let's assume that some of those terminologies are interrelated, and of course, we are just going to capitalize on cybersecurity. Well, generally speaking, if you ask what cybersecurity is to five people, they may have different way of looking at what cybersecurity is all about. And the truth is that they might not be wrong in the way they look at cybersecurity, because cybersecurity is just a terminology, a tech terminology that evolves and changes all the time. And perhaps the best way for you to look and understand cybersecurity is not just from its definition, but perhaps that will depend more in terms of its principles or what cybersecurity as a discipline is just out to achieve. But to narrow it down, cybersecurity refers to the practice of protecting systems, networks, and data from cyber threats such as hacking, malware, and of course, data breaches. This is just simply in terms of its definition, we can actually say cybersecurity is just all about. So again, it encompasses various technologies, policies, strategies to safeguard digital assets. So again, cybersecurity is a very broad discipline, and there's not just one way or one thing that is called cybersecurity, right? So again, that is why if you are starting a career in cybersecurity, at one point you might be confused. Now, looking at first about the definition that you have on the screen, it says is a practice of protecting systems. Okay. Now, you may start asking yourself, what are systems? Is it that I have to be very good when it comes to Windows? Is it that I have to be very good when it comes to Linux operating systems, Mac, and so on? Now, it talks about networks. What is network? Is network just simply talking about peer-to-peer connection, or maybe a social gathering called networks, or what does it mean? I mean, a lot of questions might be running through your mind, especially if you're a novice and you're trying to begin a career in that field. We have data security and so on. But again, a lot of people, I'm sure you are more familiar with the concept of hacking, breach, than even what cybersecurity is all about. Why? Because we seem to get a lot of bad news brought our way every day that the bad guys are actually trying to infiltrate our data than actually the best practices on how we can actually go about it. It seems as if the bad news travel faster than the good news. But in a nutshell, as I mentioned, again, it all encompasses various technologies, right? Policies, strategies on how to safeguard digital data as a whole. So that is just simply what, again, cybersecurity looks like. Just as I mentioned earlier on, understanding just what cybersecurity is all about might be best understood by looking at what I call cybersecurity principles and objectives, right? So the principles and objectives are just a better way that I think one can use, especially if you are just beginning your career in cybersecurity, so struggling to understand what cybersecurity is all about. Now, the main objectives or some of the main objectives of cybersecurity rotates around what they call CIA, usually CIA triad. And when we talk about CIA triad, what we are talking about here is we are just simply okay. So as we were saying, cybersecurity, based on its principles, could be actually one of those methods that can help us to fully understand and comprehend what it is. Now, again, the three principles here is the principle of what we talk confidentiality. Now, generally, when we talk about confidentiality, again, it is just preventing unauthorized access. That is what it is. Just very straightforward, right? Now, again, the next terminology or principle here is what we call integrity. Now, integrity here simply means ensuring that data accuracy and trustworthiness. So, again, data should not be modified by anybody that does not have the right to do that particular modification. And of course, the last concept or principle that we can talk about here is availability. Data or your resources should be available to you at any given moment that you need them. So again, the whole concept of cybersecurity more revolves around these major three principles right here. Because remember that we are living now in an era when in code we can call it a global village. And when we say a global village is because now the internet has made it easier for us to communicate. Now, before the advent of the internet, usually data was being stored in somehow, like we say, servers. They were also stored in things like cupboards, or they had things like safer places where they could store their data, right? So just imagine, or let me use an example of what I call a national library or a library as a whole. A library as a whole, as we know it, is a place where a lot of information can be contained. You have books, you have all forms of documentations, and so on. So again, but now in the digital world, we have those libraries, and those libraries are now held not in physical buildings, but those libraries now are held even in what I call servers. So which means that again, it becomes challenging to be able to secure them. Why? Because the bad guys at any given time can always try to get access to this information. And again, as I explained earlier on, understanding what cybersecurity is, especially if you are just beginning your career in cybersecurity, can be somehow challenging. but understanding its basic principles will actually be of great help for you to navigate your way around. And as mentioned, confidentiality ensures that all authorized users can access data. And sometimes, again, that is achieved, not sometimes, most of the times, when we talk about confidentiality, you will hear things like encryption, you hear things like access controls, and many others. Now, we also look at integrity, which prevents unauthorized alteration to data. And in this case, therefore, we can talk about the use of hash function for the integrity, and we can talk about the use of digital signatures, just to mention a few. And availability, again, when we talk about availability, one of the things that come into your mind is backups and redundancy and so on. Well, if you're listening to me, if you're new, that's fine. It might not make sense to you, but again, the goal is that as you grow, you will come to understand more of these terminologies. So, other core principles that, again, if you are beginning your career, which you will always hear or come across in cybersecurity, include things like least privilege, right? So, what is a least privilege? Least privilege only grants users the minimum access that they need. That is just simply what the concept of least privilege is all about. You commonly hear other terminologies like defense in depth. Defense in depth is just what I call multiple layers of security controls, whereby you have to engage many controls at the same time in order to secure a particular asset right there. We have what we call fail-safe default. Systems should deny access by default and so on. Separation of duties. No single person should actually control critical functions. We have security by design. Security should be built into a system from start. Again, these are some of the terminologies that, again, if you are new to cybersecurity, you might not fully understand them, but as you begin to go through the process or learning the basics of cybersecurity, it is going to make more sense to you. So again, another important concept, especially in nowadays, that is very good for you to understand and to learn if you are planning to build a career in cybersecurity, is the concept of what I call castle and moat security. The castle and moat security is very, very important that, again, you understand this concept. What the Tesla mode security is just simply basically a contrast between what I call traditional perimeter security and of what I now call today zero trust, or what is popularly called today zero trust. But again, the traditional security system is a little bit different from what the world is now gravitating toward, to be able to make sure that things again look more secure and more hardened. Now, under the traditional perimeter security, in bracket usually considered as the castle and the moat security model, again, this of course was, I would say, a legacy security model, whereby, again, emphasis on security was more placed on the external, let's say the castle in this case, whereby the use of maybe firewalls, VPCs, and so on will be used as a means of securing resources. But just as I mentioned, this is just a discussion. This is not really going into depth to explain all those concepts and how they work. But again, this is just an overall concept or discussion to guide anybody that is beginning a career, so that at least you will be able to understand what you need to learn and what skills you need to actually know. But generally, again, when you're talking about legacy security model, the castle and moat is like, okay, just think about a castle, right? And in a castle, you find that, especially in the Middle Ages, the castles were mostly fortified from the outside, which means that you have security guard that will stand outside. Maybe the person is isolated and it's found within, in the body of inside water, or maybe an island. So, which means for you to get access there is difficult. But the assumption here is that if you can beat the external security and you get inside the perimeter, then you have all the full rights to be able to access anything that you want in there. So again, that is just with that concept that they call it traditional perimeter security, right? But now with the new concepts again of security assumes everything inside the network, of course, is trusted, which is no longer effective. And of course, again, with modern security concept, which is built on the concept of zero trust, it's like, okay, we don't trust anything, but everything has to be verified. With a traditional way, it's like, okay, if your firewall is a first place of defense, as soon as you bypass the firewall, as soon as bypass the VPN, and you get access to the network, then you have all the full power to do whatever thing that you can. So in this case, therefore, if you are planning to actually learn cybersecurity, make sure that wheresoever you get your training from, it might be a university, it might be a college, it might be a boot camp, whether you decide to go by yourself to study or self-study, make sure that you also understand these principles because they are going to help you somehow, especially to understand where security is nowadays. And of course, the opposite or the total opposite of what we just spoke about it, that is a traditional perimeter security, is what I call the zero trust model. And of course, zero trust model is a more advanced security model that is built on the concept of never trust, always verify. Never trust, always verify, which means that it doesn't matter whether you're out of your network or you are inside the network. Again, everything must be authenticated and given that authorization. That is just simply what the philosophy is all about. So, again, for me, and of course, this is my personal opinion. If you have to be a good security person, then you need to be able to understand how this concept of zero trust work and use this concept of zero trust to be able to build and to architect a very strong security. Now, again, there are different elements that you can see within the framework of zero trust. And this actually, I for one, I prefer the CISA zero trust model that has emphasis on five major areas. For example, identity and access management. We have things like device management. We have things like, of course, application security, network segmentation, and data security. And you have to understand that when we talk about zero trust, there are different DoD, they have their own version of the zero trust. And when we talk about things like NIST also, they have their own version of what zero trust is all about. So again, for you to be very successful building security, you have also to consider that because if you have just to talk about security without building it into a particular framework, it becomes very, very difficult for you. Because the temptation I've seen with a lot of students is that they go to school, it might be a university, a college, or a boot camp. They might study risk management framework. They might study other forms of enterprise, maybe risk management framework, or they can study even networking, and they can study a Linux operating system. And of course, those are very good skills for you to have. But at the end of the day, having studied all those skills without actually knowing how to apply them, it becomes problematic. So again, this is where finally the concept of having a framework comes in, which is going to help you. Now, I have spoke about the concept of zero trust. And I said, okay, let's assume that the zero trust model we are going to be using, or we can talk about here, is based on CISA zero trust. And CISA zero trust has five major pillars. And let's talk about the concept of identity and access management. You see, identity and access management itself is very, very broad. There are a lot of things that you can think about it. You can talk about it under the zero trust architecture. You can talk about it from the perspective of cloud. You can talk about it from AWS IAM. You can talk about Azure Entra. You can talk about things like Okta. You can talk about, again, things like PAM solutions that are also very needed. We have things like SailPoint. We have things like CyberArk. We have a lot of technologies that can be used right there. HashiCorp, perimeter, parameter stores, I beg your pardon. So again, there are so many things that we can talk about here. So again, if you went to school, for example, and you did Linux, you did Windows, and so on, and maybe you fell in love with Linux because you thought that, hey, when I graduate, I'm going to be an ethical hacker because I can use Linux. I can now, I'm very good with Windows operating system. It's an excellent thought. That's an excellent thought. But one of the things that you need also to understand here, right here, is that again, you studying Linux and studying Windows, you can still use that skills to factor that into maybe a data loss prevention strategy, whereby again it can help you to be able to manage those devices of within an organization. Now, remember that organizations we always have needs of devices, right? Because people will always connect to their environment, their corporate resources using all forms of devices. Some will be using Windows, some will be using Mac, some are going to be using their phones, and so on. So again, there are a lot of things right here. So again, you cannot be so successful as a security person if truly you do not fully understand security frameworks. Again, security frameworks are very, very important. But at the very basic level, when you start studying cybersecurity, again, you might decide to go with CompTIA Network A plus or Network Plus, Security Plus. That is a very good start right there. Some of those certifications will just touch the basis of what I'm saying, but they might not go so deeply. But by the moment that you start looking at a little bit higher level by looking at certifications from ISACA, maybe you start talking about CISA, CISM, all those things, CRATE, or you start looking at things like the CISSP, you will see that again, it combines technology, and the technology can only be effective if you have a framework that you are actually going to follow. So again, it's very important that if you are beginning or you have had any prior training in any boot camp, in any school, in any institution, you should be able to understand that zero trust is just simply the game changer right now. And of course, again, many of us, we are already practicing the concept of zero trust. You might not simply know that you are already practicing cybersecurity. For example, you want to log into your bank, they have to send you a code, and of course, you have to go to your email or you have to use maybe an authenticator to be able to retrieve that code. That is already a cybersecurity practice that you are doing right there. And because, again, remember, that falls under identity and access management, which is one of those pillars of the CISA zero trust architecture or model. So again, I encourage you, if you are studying cybersecurity, to really go out there and to learn as much as you can learn when it comes to, again, building your skills around the zero trust architecture. And so again, just as I mentioned earlier on, perimeter securities versus zero trust, right? A comparative analysis. As you can rightly see here on my screen, we have what we call perimeter security in bracket, castle and mode, which of course assumes that the internal network is safe. And this is a very bad security concept. It's like, okay, you somebody is coming to your house, you check the person's ID at the gate, and because you check the person's ID at the gate, you approve of the person gets into your house, you believe that everything is safe with you just because you check the person at the gate. No, that I mean that is just a very faulty security concept, right? Because somebody can still pass a security check at the gate, but when that person gets in there, you never can predict the intention of the person. And then this also opens up to think and talk about what we call zero insider threat, right? So if you look at it very well, this parameter security or this perimeter security is most likely to suffer more in terms of what they call insider threats. Why? Because if security is assumed just that let's look at it outward, Or let's assume that since we have authenticated everybody outwardly, or maybe using the firewall or VPN, then let the person go inside. We are safe. That was just simply a very bad ideology right there. So when a security shift actually occurred, again, we now develop what they call zero trust, which means in terms of trust model, hey, zero trust doesn't trust anyone. It doesn't trust any identity. It doesn't trust any device on the network. Again, data actually right there must be the right resources or principles or identities must be vetted to be able to get access to any of those resources. Applications themselves, hey, they are not trusted like that. They need to always go through a constant security checks and so on. Which, of course, again, it makes more sense. So, if your understanding of security, even if you have been in the field, is still built around the fact that you are good at perimeter security, I'm afraid because you might not be up to date with your knowledge and you might actually need to update yourself. The next thing we are going to talk about here is, for this contrast, is what I call the access control. Now, when it comes to perimeter security, again, access control is based on the network location. Whereas when it comes to zero trust architecture, access control is based on identity and context based. When you talk about identity here, an identity here can just be about a user. Who is the user who is trying to get access? It can just simply be maybe an application that is trying to get access. But the whole goal here of being an identity is that, again, an identity, once you're identified and you want access to a particular resource, then the need to know also counts. Does your role actually permit you to have access to this particular resource that you are requesting? If so, yes, you are granted access. If no, you are denied access. Now, again, remember that here you must be authenticated first, which means you have to provide maybe a username and a password. And in some cases, you might provide a PIF if you are working for a government agency and you have a PIF card. But again, that is just the first step. That is called authentication. And once, therefore, you pass that particular first step, there is now what we call authorization, which means you have to be authorized by giving access to the resource that you need. But the fact that you are authorized doesn't mean that you have access to all the resources. But again, it has to be narrowed down, just limiting you on what we call the concept of least privilege. Let's talk about the security focus here or the security scope. Well, again, on perimeter security, the focus is more on external threats, right? But when it comes to the zero trust, security is more focused on what I called both internal and external threats. Remember, when it comes to zero trust architecture, it doesn't trust anything, it doesn't trust anybody. Everybody must be vetted, everybody must be authenticated before they are given access to any resources. Now, talk about authentication, one time verification. But again, under zero trust is a continuous verification, right? It's a continuous verification. Why? Because once in the network, again, your mind can change. A lot of things can happen. Once you have been approved, a lot of things can happen. You see, let me give a very simple analogy right here. The concept of authentication in perimeter security is like somebody, let's say an employee that comes to work in the bank. You say, okay, since you passed your interview and we have done your background check, you can just go into the safe where we keep money, and then you can do what you want. You can count the money and so on. And there's no system to verify if that employee is likely to steal or not. The fact that that employee passed the interview phase and went through the background phase, that doesn't mean that that employee can be trusted 100%. Yes, in terms of background, that employee is clear. There's no criminal record. There is nothing that can hold that employee back. But now you can never determine and predict the actions of human beings. Now, again, in zero trust architecture, it says, okay, I understand that we are going to do the verification. Let the person pass the back or the interview and the background. And again, that doesn't give me trust, right? So even if the person goes into the safe room where we have all the money, again, from time to time, we need to verify that person. We need to have CCTV cameras right there. We need to authenticate. There might be a call log that that user will need to register his or her name right there so that we are going to know who actually logged in at what time. The person must maybe may enter a code to get access to the door so that in case something happens via the code, and the code attributed to this user, we can know that this person had access and so on. So it is an act of continuous security monitoring right there. And of course, let's talk about the risk of breach. The risk of breach, again, under perimeter security is very, very high because the bad guys know that the only effort they need to know is to break through the first line of defense. Once they have broken through the first line of defense, then they will be able to have their way. But now under zero trust architecture, the risk is very much reduced because one, your network is segmented, your resources can be actually residing in different subnets, which means that if one bad guy succeeds to break into your network, maybe if let's assume that if the one bad guy spent 10 hours in order to break into one of your network, it might still require him about 10 hours plus again to break through the other network. So you see, it's a lot, it's very, very strenuous. And of course, most hackers, especially if they're novice, do not really have the time and that patience to go through this particular process. So again, there's a lot of questions that students ask me all the time, and I always tell them there is not just one way to look at security. The best way for you to remain relevant in cybersecurity is just for you to understand where technology is going. You might come across this recording. Maybe your knowledge of security is still built on the concept of perimeter security, parcel, and more doctrine. That may be one of the reasons why you are struggling with jobs. You cannot successfully go, or your resume is not you don't receive calls after your resume has been online for maybe months and so on. Again, you are unable to get calls. You don't even know what is happening. Why? It's not that you don't have the skills. It's not that you don't know. It's just because once your resume that is sitting on the job portal is the link between you and your recruiters. So when your recruiters go online and they see your resume and they don't see that your knowledge is updated, of course, they will feel that you do not know or you don't qualify or you don't have the skills it takes for them to be able to drive this new technology. So let's now talk a little bit about cybersecurity frameworks and standards. Well, you cannot obviously do cybersecurity without you having full knowledge of what cybersecurity frameworks and standards are all about. It can be very confusing sometimes. And again, especially nowadays where a lot of people have that passion for cybersecurity and they do not know where to go. There are a lot of boot camps that will emphasize the whole. We are specialized just on teaching cybersecurity. And again, when you hear people say we are teaching cybersecurity, you might never be too certain about what they are talking about until you see their curriculum. Because somebody will tell you we are teaching cybersecurity, but technically what they're offering you is that they are focused on teaching compliance, maybe risk management framework, and there's nothing wrong with that. Other people will say, oh, we are teaching cybersecurity. We are focused on maybe audit or cybersecurity audit and so on. And there's nothing wrong with that. Again, some people will say we are teaching cybersecurity, but we are teaching but networking. There is nothing wrong with that. There is no wrong way for you to start a career in cybersecurity. But the truth here is you need to have a broad and balanced knowledge when we are talking about cybersecurity. There is no way you are going to talk about cybersecurity without actually understanding how cybersecurity frameworks work. Because again, people are going to interpret cybersecurity the way they understand it. And so that is why understanding a frameworks will help you to be able to achieve a common way of thinking, or is going to help you to achieve a common language. And when we are talking about cybersecurity frameworks, there are local frameworks and there are also international frameworks. Or when I say local frameworks, I'm just indirectly talking about frameworks that belong to a particular country, even though being developed by a particular country doesn't mean that other countries cannot use it. And one of the most popular frameworks nowadays are developed by the National Institute of Standard and Technology, of course, whose headquarters is located in Gettysburg, Maryland, and is also actually under the Department of Commerce. But now let's look at all what it is. When you talk about the NIST cybersecurity framework, there are two things here that I would like you to understand. If you are listening to me and you've never been exposed to maybe the concept of frameworks and so on, one of the very most popular frameworks developed in the United States that is used by other countries is is from NIST. NIST, which stands for the National Institute for Standard and Technology, is not just focused on cybersecurity. As a matter of fact, some of you might be surprised to hear that the concept of NIST, the NIST that is called today, or NIST as an a department responsible for writing all the security policies were founded since 1903. And I think from its early creation, I think it was considered I don't know if there's a Department of Statistics or Labor, whatever be the case. I have to look that up again. But it was founded in 1903, and one of its main goal was to be able to create standardization across different industries, not just cybersecurity. And so it so happened that with the advent of cybersecurity, they had to involve cybersecurity as one of their major area of focus, and they've developed a lot of standards in different areas. And of course, it is always numbered in what I call the SP 800 series. So again, that is how it is usually numbered. But one of the most important thing you have to understand here is that if you are studying this or you have done a NIST or something related to NIST before, in line with cybersecurity, there are two frameworks that NIST actually publishes or is published out there. And one of it is directed towards the federal government and federal agencies, and that is popularly called the risk management framework. And of course, the risk management framework, which I believe actually went into effect around 2002, and that was after the issue with the World Trade Center. And we also have what we call the NIST cybersecurity framework. So, what is the difference between the two? Because at least people can be confused. Well, again, initially, when the risk management framework was developed, the whole concept was to be able to have a unified language that was going to unify all the government agencies. Technically speaking, or logically speaking, when it was developed, the main target was not the general public or private companies as a whole, but again, it was more focused for the government. And I give an example. Imagine that if there are 400 and let's say 58 agencies in the United States. Again, I'm just estimating. I'm not saying that is the number of agencies we have in the United States. Now, just imagine that if you have 450 something agencies in the United States, and the government has to talk about cybersecurity. Now, you see, all those agencies are going to think cybersecurity differently. They are not going to think cybersecurity within the same scope. So, in this case, therefore, in order to create a unified way of thinking about cybersecurity, the government therefore decided that, hey, we are going to create, therefore, this framework so that all the agencies or federal agencies or anything related to the government, they are going to use this as a blueprint to be able to think about security, cybersecurity. So, on the other hand, when therefore the risk management framework became very popular, I think around the 2014 or something of that nature, when cloud became a very hot topic, when the government decided to say, hey, you know what? We're going to take advantage of this issue called cloud. It's going to save us a lot of money as well. They extended the risk management concept framework, which later on gave birth to what I call the FedRAMP. FedRAMP therefore simply means any company that wants a cloud service provider, not any company, but any cloud service provider that wants to do business with the government, they will actually meet a particular standard or they will meet a particular requirement and so on. So that is why you see therefore the concept of risk management framework. And if you are indirectly doing cybersecurity somewhere, and you happen to listen to this video, now know that risk management framework alone it's not going to really help you much because we have transitioned in a higher dimension in the risk management phase using the NIST cybersecurity framework or using NIST security framework. Why? Because imagine that if the risk management framework concept was enacted around 2000 and of course, let's say two, and we're in 2025. Now look at the gap right here, which means from 2000 and two, right up to maybe 2014. Now you already see the gap when the risk management framework was really much in effect. So again, from 2014 to 2025, the risk management framework also has been very much enforced, encouraging government agencies to go right there in the cloud. Now, you see that if you are only focusing on risk management framework, it's good, but the chances for you to get even interviews might be a little bit minimal if your goal is to be able to work in that area. Why? Because at least most companies today are migrating in the cloud. Whether you're working for federal agencies, they may be considering migrating in the cloud. So if you get hired, your cloud skills is going to be a bonus, which means again you need to understand FedRAM. And for you to understand FedRAM, if already you did things like risk management framework, it only gives you 50% of the knowledge. But again, for you to be fully grounded as far as FedRAM and even StateRAM is concerned, you would need at least to have done cloud. When I'm talking about cloud, I'm not talking about you just reading from maybe books or just knowing, understanding the terminology. You might need to have some hands-on AWS. You might need to have some hands-on Azure, or you may need to also have some hands-on on GCP as well. So again, it's a very long journey. So again, I know many people are trapped right now because perhaps they have been trained or they went to a boot camp and they did a risk management framework. I'm like, okay, it's the easiest one. I just need to get this and I start getting a job. And that could possibly be the reason why you are just struggling where you are. So again, if that be your case, it's never too late. You can still build new skills in addition to what you have. Now, coming back to the second part of the NIST cybersecurity framework, one of the things as well is the development of the cybersecurity framework, popularly called SCSF. And now this framework itself is still developed by the same NIST, but the target now is more open to private companies. Because remember that with the risk management framework of FedRAM, again, it is more tied to the government and not and other private companies, they might love it, but they may not just simply want to overuse it or engage themselves into it because it is mostly for the private for the government sector. But that doesn't mean they cannot use it. As a matter of fact, many private companies would love to use this SP 800 53 or the 5, which is what is updated right now from the recording of this video and so on. And the NIST cybersecurity framework, the CSF, is just similar to the risk management framework, but this time around it's a little bit more open and it targets even the private sector. And that is why you see other governments or other countries are more prone or are more quick to use the cybersecurity framework. And again, this is just a discussion, a talk, because a lot of students have asked me a lot of questions around this. And I hope that this explanation is also going to help clarify you. And more so, if you're in the United States, then the NIST cybersecurity framework or risk management framework might make sense to you more. But if you are out of the United States, well, you have to check your geographical area because if you are building skills on risk management framework and you are not living in the United States, well, the possibility of you being hired out of the United States is very, very low unless the particular company that wants to hire you is actually using the NIST SP, the risk management framework as it is in the United States. Now, on the flip side of it, if you're out of the United States, we also have what they call the ISO series, which are just international series or the same security standards that you can actually use. Again, we have other frameworks that include the CIS, that is the Center for Internet Security Controls, which also has a 20 privatized security controls that are used for cybersecurity defense and so on. Again, remember that the whole concept of this framework and standard is just a way to provide you with a common language so that at least we are going to think uniform. If you are within a company, again, we should be able to have that same uniform in terms of thinking cybersecurity. Let nobody be thinking that cybersecurity is this and the other person is thinking that cybersecurity is that. Because again, cybersecurity can mean anything to anybody unless it is properly channeled within a context. Again, these are just some of the few listed cybersecurity frameworks. There are so many others out there. And again, the choice might therefore depend on just each and every individual and their business needs. So again, some of the frameworks and regulations here include the GDPR, which stands for the General Data Protection Regulation, that protects personal data for European citizens. And again, if you're in the United States in the healthcare, they have what they call the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, which ensures healthcare data security. And if you are in the credit, if you're using a business using credit cards to process your business, then you are subject to what we call the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. And again, it's a security guidelines for a credit card transaction. And we already spoke about things like the risk management framework, FISMA, and so on. Again, it's a security requirement for the federal agencies. Now, let's talk about the job market in cybersecurity because, again, this is a very important issue right here. Now, there's not just one way to really answer a question on the job market right now because some people go in for the job. Their concept of the job market depends on the job growth. Some people may be thinking about the job market in terms of maybe job security, just to mention a few. So again, in terms of cybersecurity, according to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, again, it is predicted that from now to the year 2031, that is in the next 5 years, if you're listening to me, this recording is being done in 2025. So it is predicted that in the next 6 years to come, the market trend is going to rise by 35%. And I think that again, this is actually one of the highest and fastest growing job in the nation so far, not just in the nation, but also in the world, right? So again, the global cybersecurity workforce is actually in shortage, or the shortage exceeds maybe 3.5 million professionals. Again, that is just simply how the concept, the profession of cybersecurity can be in demand. But even though you might find it that wow, there are a lot of jobs in cybersecurity and so on, that's good. But you have to understand first of all what skills for you to build in order for you to tap in the cybersecurity market. So now let's talk about some of those most demand roles right there, because again, for you to have the desire to be a cybersecurity professional is one thing, and for you also to understand the role or what you are going in for is another thing. And that is why I want us to look into this or some of the roles. And usually, for people who are just finishing college or finishing the university, you have learned a lot of things, Linux, your Windows, networking, and so on. Sometimes being a SOC analyst is one of those places that you start your career. But now, as a SOC analyst, what you do on day-to-day basis is you sit in front of the computer, you will have to use different technology tools. It might be SIM tools, it might be unified threat management tools, and so on. So a combination of technology to be able to monitor the traffic that is taking place within your network and so, and you respond to it. But again, being a SOC analyst is good. But now, again, with the involvement of cloud, just being a SOC analyst based on traditional security mindset might not actually be so helpful. But it's good for you to also try to have a lot of knowledge when it comes to cloud. And of course, maybe extend your tentacles to what I call artificial intelligence, because that is also going to help you. But again, being a SOC analyst, with the coming of cloud, everything is somehow being absorbed into cloud. Now you can have like SOC as a service and so on, which also can be a challenge, and especially with the modernization of security automation. Like for example, I can say Splunk Phantom and many other ones that are there. A lot of SOC analysts may find their job threatened because, again, automation is coming to do and perform the work faster than what a regular employee in a SOC environment or SOC center is actually going to do. The next thing here, a lot of people think about being a penetration tester or hacker, which is of course very, very good. But again, if you have to be a penetration tester or hacker, well, it is a very good mindset, but just know that you will have to a lot of skills to learn. You will need to understand, first of all, things like networking. You will need to understand things like cybersecurity, understand the different attacks, threats, and vulnerabilities, and so on. And then you will need to understand the different operating system. And from understanding the operating system, you need to be very good with Linux because, again, Linux is going to be the foundation with which you are going to use to be able to carry on your day-to-day job. And on the flip side of it too, you need to also know how to work with vulnerability management and vulnerability scanners and so on. Again, so when we are talking now about vulnerability scanners here, or ethical hacking, then again, it might sound so simple as you may think, but the body of knowledge you take to build is greater than that of a SOC analyst. And the reason why I say so is because you need to be proficient in different areas like networking. You need to be proficient in areas like maybe scripting. You need to be proficient in other areas like operating system, Linux, Windows, and other operating system. You need to be proficient also in cloud because cloud also has a lot of vulnerabilities that hackers will want to hack. You may need to be proficient in containers and container security and vulnerability, which can open to a lot of vulnerability right there. You need to be proficient also as far as the CI/CD pipeline is concerned, understand how that application development process actually works. Why? Because again, understanding it is going to permit you to know how to be able to categorize your skills. For example, if you're a pen tester, again, you know network, then you have to know which are the tools that are going to go for network scans. If you want to talk about application scanning or hacking, then you should be able to know which are the different tools that are good for when it comes to application. If you want to deal with operating systems, which of the tools are good for me to use as far as operating systems are concerned? If you are talking about cloud, you need to be able to know which of the tools for me to use. If you are talking about password cracking, then you should be able to know which of the tools that you can use. And so, again, it's a lot of skills and knowledge that you need to get right here and be very careful because, hey, don't just get excited because you are learning ethical hacking in school or you just saw some random video on YouTube and you just want to go and practice on your own by downloading a lot of software in your computer that you don't have control and you don't have any sandbox environment. Of course, it can result to what I call a script kiddie, which, of course, if there is any casualty that is done, again, your ignorance is not an excuse for you being prosecuted. So again, just be very careful, especially if you are aspiring to be an ethical hacker, a penetration tester. There are a lot of web-based sandboxes like TryHackMe that you can also use, and so on, and many other labs that you can use, and that is really going to be helpful to you. Again, one of the things you have to understand is, again, when it comes to maybe the job market for penetration tester, you may need to find those companies like the 3PAO in case of maybe a third party assessment, either offer third party assessment for organizations. And so they are some of the people that sometimes are looking to hire people with skills when it comes to penetration testing. Now, again, we talk about cloud security engineer because this is one area now that a lot of people are neglecting their skills. Again, I'm going to compare cloud nowadays into like zero trust, and of course, compare and people without cloud skills are going to be compared to people who are still operating under what I call the perimeter security. Now, cloud security here is very important, especially if you have to consider yourself as a cloud security engineer. There are a lot of things that you need to know. Again, there are three popular clouds, especially if you're in the United States, but at least you should have good solid knowledge about. For example, Azure, AWS, and GCP. These are some of those particular cloud service providers that are well known around the world. Now, when you are talking about cloud security engineer, again, It's a little bit very tricky right here because I have seen a lot of students, or they have come to me, hey, Professor Bona, we need help right here. Now, they start by doing AWS as a solution architect, and that is very perfect. The fact that you do AWS solution architect, that does not simply means that he has prepared you for you to be a cloud, a security guru. It has only prepared you with a mindset for you to understand how cloud works in general, how you can deploy your resources. And one other challenge that people that have done a focus just on maybe cloud, or it can be Azure, GCP, or AWS will face when it comes to integrating that with security is that they think that security is only, they look at security just from how AWS or any cloud service provider defines them. Because most of the tools already they have their security built in there. But now, while it is a very good security concept, each cloud service provider builds security to protect its own tools. But now, if you are a if you are a security person, and you are looking at security just by looking at the whole architecture of maybe AWS, permit me to use AWS, so that's my preferred cloud platform. So again, when I talk about AWS, the same concept can be applicable to any cloud wherever you are listening to me. Okay. So now, if you, for example, you did AWS and you have the AWS solution architect, it is very good. Now, you now see that even if you have the AWS security specialty, you now see that when you are talking in terms of security, your level of security understanding cannot be the same like somebody who comes from a traditional security, right? Because again, you are looking at security like within the castle, and you don't see security out of the castle. So, which means if I ask you to design me a data loss prevention strategy and your resources are hosted within cloud, the best thing you are going to tell me is okay, you go and look at identity and access management, you look at permission building and how permissions are granted. You go to EC2 instance, you look at how your security groups are provisioned. You go to VPC, you talk about subnet, and you can talk whatever the case. But now you see what you are saying logically makes sense and it is very correct, but it is very limited in scope for you to be a full qualified cloud security person. Why? Because a company might migrate into the cloud and they have other instances of servers that are actually sitting right there on on-prem. And you see that most AWS tools or cloud Azure native tools may only end up to protect resources that are within cloud. It may not go to protect resources that are out of the cloud environment. And that is where you face a lot of difficulties. Why? Because again, how will you be able to protect them? So that is where the concept of hybrid security comes in. So now you see why some cloud company, some cloud service providers may, or they want to hire you for a cloud security engineer role. In addition to the skills that you have in AWS, they may want you to also have skills in having knowledge of other tools. It might be like container security. It can be things like SIM solution. It can be Splunk. It can be Small Logic. I mean, it can be any other tools right there that can be integrated. How does it integrate with other tools right there? Because again, even if you look at AWS Marketplace, it doesn't just pride itself on its own tools, but other vendors themselves can integrate their tools within AWS. So again, being a cloud security engineer is not just being contented because you pass a certification in AWS and you think that you have arrived. No, it goes just beyond that. You have to stretch yourself, you have to understand. Now, again, I give you a very simple and logical example. If I were to ask you a question now, how will you be able to prevent maybe a DDoS attack? Well, if you don't have enough understanding of security to understand what the DDoS attack is all about, the truth here is that you might know that WAF is used for security purpose. AWS Shield is used for security purpose, but you might not be able to. The fact that you don't understand what DDoS attack is all about, that particular knowledge will not be able to help you. Even though you have a solution architect certification, you understand it very well, how the tool works, you can configure it. But if they do an interview, they will not ask you, tell me how you have configured that. But what they'll be interested to know is now, how will you be, or an organization just move into the cloud, AWS, and one of their worries is that they fear what DDoS, that they might be subject or they might be attacked with a DDoS attack. So, what is the security solution you will recommend? Now, again, this calls for a layer security approach, right? There's no one way to talk about it. But principal tools that AWS designed for DDoS attack might include things like WAF, things like AWS Shield, and just to mention a very few. But now, if they ask you out of it, can you explain what a distributed denial of service is? How does it occur? What is like a DHCP flow and so on, or attack? You might not be able to understand what is DNS. You might not be able to understand. You might understand Route 23 very well, but you might not be able to explain how DNS actually works. So again, this is where security comes in to build the foundation. So you build it from security. The security skills that you are getting now is like building security out of the castle. And now, when you get into the castle, you acquire the security skills by being a solution architect. Is now, oh, I now have all the complete knowledge. I have the knowledge out of the castle, and I have the knowledge in the castle. So I can talk security from the outside. I can talk security from the inside. And a lot of people fail to understand that even if you are talking about security around AWS, you don't just around cloud in general, you don't just look at it through technology. AWS is vested there, Azure is vested there, or vetted there. I mean, most of their products are approved. They also follow PCI compliance. That is just to give you a foretaste of how you should look at security if you are actually wanting to be a cloud security engineer. So it's not because you have a solution architect that you feel that you are so qualified for that. And again, scripting, understanding things like maybe Terraform, so CloudFormation, Terraform, they come in. Container security, they come in to make you a full-fledged security, a cloud security engineer. So, on the other hand, we can talk about cyber threat intelligence, which, of course, again, I might also categorize this to fall under SOC, which might just be looking at emerging threats, do analysis of IP address and URL and so on. But which is okay, but most of this is being taken over by what I call security automation and response. So again, I will classify this to fall under the SOC. Incident responder, it might also fall under the SOC. I mean, GRC. Again, this is another hot topic right here. A lot of students sometimes come and ask me the question, what do I focus on? Well, there's risk management framework. There is actually a third-party risk assessment. There is also, how do they call it? I mean, enterprise security. I mean, it's now, this is where the question is, where do you want to work? If you want to work with the government, then risk management framework is the way to go. But at the same time, you have to understand, even if you become a guru sometime in risk management framework, and sometimes for you to get a job and transition easily, it's just there are some hurdles that you need to also deal with. Why? Because you may have to deal with clearance, and of course, dealing with clearance, companies most of the times that want to reach out to you are contracting companies. They don't have the time or the resources to sponsor you for a clearance, especially if it goes beyond public trust. You will have to really, really be very lucky to get a company that is going to say, hey, we are going to spend time, we are going to sponsor you, we are going to bring you on board, and so on. Now, it's up to you if you want to go through that stress. Or if you say you want to work with the government, they will have to strip you completely because you have to provide your information, especially depending on the type of the clearance, not secret, the type of clearance you want to get. Sometimes they will have provide information about all your jobs through Equip. You provide information about your family, your income, your place of residency for the past 5 years, where you went to school, which year did you graduate. I mean, it becomes a little bit too invasive, which is more invasive than just a regular background check. But so such a question about GRC is very, very broad. But again, if you were to ask a question on choosing between any of the maybe GRC, maybe governance or framework, what again, a lot of people find that risk management framework is popular, but that is just because that is what has been preached to them. But on the flip side of things, I believe that sometimes if you want to work with the government, go for that one. But if you want to work with the private sector, then enterprise risk management may actually be a solution for you as well, where you have to look into other frameworks like the COSO framework that is also going to guide you, or that is going to help you for you to actually achieve that goal, or for you to be able to achieve that dream. So there are different certifications that pay. And again, in the tech industry, recruiters have a certain way of looking at things. They are going to look at things from one, they are going to look at things from the skills. Do you have the skills? Do you have the certification before they will look down on their degree? If you want to teach in a school, the school is going to look at your degree first. They may look at your degree matters to them most. You might not, again, they might after go to certification and before the skills, right? So again, these are things that you need to also to understand. And of course, the most paid certifications right now, they include things like uh again, the CISSP, CEH, we have the season, and of course, we have offensive security certified professional, AWS specialty, whatever be the case. But again, this is just a random list I put together. It doesn't mean that you have to put yourself through pressure because you watch this video and you say you have to get the certification. Most of the certification I mentioned, CISSP, requires at least 5 years minimum experience before you can be allowed to even go in, or you can be given the certification. It doesn't mean that if you're a genius, you want to go and read and pass the exam, good luck with that. But again, they have very strict requirement from IC Square. Certified ethical hacking, okay, is great. They also have as they call Pen Test Plus. If that's what you desire, you can also take a look at it. And so finally, we'll just talk about the future trends in cybersecurity. Things like AI powered security is also very important. Right now, AI is the talk of the day. Zero trust adoption, cloud and DevSecOps, government compliance rules. Again, we talk about FISMA, FedRAMP, uh, GDPR, and HIPAA compliance. These are very hot topics. And of course, in future, these will still continue to be developed and so on and so forth. So again, this particular session we are hosting, as I mentioned earlier on, if you just join, and again, this is going to be what I call, let's talk about your cybersecurity career. And this is just part one of the many series that I'm going to be bringing up to you, so that at least it can help you make informed decision for your career. And again, our vision statement is to be the leading platform that empowers cybersecurity professionals at all levels with the knowledge, the mentorship, and the resources needed to navigate their areas, drive innovation, and safeguard the digital world. That is just our vision statement right there. Once again, I appreciate all your time. And of course, I will open the floor if you have any question for those that are listening to me. If you have any doubts, you need any clarification, then you can unmute yourself and you can ask your question. Any question?
So, Prof, we see it's very vast. So, the key thing that I took away is understanding security from before and what is presently being used today, and kind of then directing which way you want to go.
Can you repeat that again?
So what I understand is like it's the to have a good foundation is to understand security from how it was used before and before like it going to cloud and things like that, like having the major foundation of the concepts and then deciding kind of where you want to specialize in.
Yes, I mean that's just a good philosophy to go about it. There is all the core courses. Remember that when you go to the college or university, they always have what they call core courses, right? Which are the core courses that you must take because it's going to empower you so much. And then they have what they call electives. So you have your major and you have your minor. So your major generally is going to constitute to build you the strong foundation for the technology itself, and your minor or in bracket elective might just be your area of specialization.
Okay, that's what I got it. Okay, cool.
Any other question?
Uh, yeah, I wish to ask the order in which you arrange here. Is that the way they come? Like, if somebody wants to specialize, is it
Well, I barely
usually
hear you. Your network is bad.
hey, since from day one? Can you hear me now, please?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm asking that uh, the way I see you presenting it there is like there is a certain way or a format in which maybe if somebody wants to begin, is it really necessary or must someone begin from the stock or you can dive directly into maybe governance or cloud development, something like that? Or is there a sequence or you can just choose
Well,
what you
thank you
want to
very much.
specialize
I will
in?
rephrase your question for the purpose of audibility. Now, the question is trying to find out is if there is a sequence that somebody should follow in order to be able to achieve their training or to go in cybersecurity. Well, the truth
Yes.
being told is it is like a yes and no at the same time. Yes, in the sense that there are some fundamental things that you need to understand as far as technology is concerned, right? When you understand those fundamentals, it is going to help you to be able to build or to navigate your way in the industry. And on the other hand, to answer your question, it can be very challenging to say you have to begin with a specific area because, again, if you are residing, for example, in Canada or maybe in South Africa, then a risk management framework might not be applicable to you. Organizations may not be using that, right? So again, if I tell you that specialize in risk management framework, then I mean it's a good specialization, but the context in which you are may not be able to help you. So the general the assumption here is get the fundamental of what you need. And of course, you can therefore specialize based on the demand of any geographical location where you find yourself. If you want to specialize in cloud security, get the foundation of what cloud is security is all about. Study about cloud. If in your location or your geographical location, GCP is more in demand, then focus your energy on GCP. If Azure is more in demand, focus your energy right there. And if AWS is more in demand, focus your energy right there. So I think that is just the best way for you to look at it that way. But for now, if you are just starting a career, forget about the specialization, build the core skills. And that is why you see out of 10 jobs that have been published in cybersecurity, most, at least 8 to 9 of them will recommend a security plus. Why? Because a security plus is considered to be like one of the core foundational certification that will boost your cybersecurity career.
All right. Thank you. Well understood.
So, is there any other question? Well,
Yes, I wanted to.
yes, go on, please.
Yes, in one of your classes, oh, you made mention of the fact on how we should be preparing to build our CV based on how which area we are more versatile with. So I wanted to understand exactly how to do that because when you showed us your sample, I
Uh,
realized that there are some problems there that you've been solving. So at this point, what problem can we say we have solved or we intend to solve? As you said, we should be putting them in a bullet form.
well, unfortunately, I barely hear you because your network is really, really bad. So yes, I don't know if you have to want to ask a question later on offline or you want to type it because we barely hear the question.
All right, I'll type and send to your WhatsApp right away.
Okay, so basically, once again, I want to officially welcome you. And of course, this broadcast or webinar was brought to you from K2 Cybertech. And of course, this is just going to be a part, or this is just part one of the numerous series that we are going to be talking about your cybersecurity career. So the main goal of this section was not really to teach so profoundly on a specific skill set, but again, it was just to talk about some of the common problems and questions that a lot of people ask on day-to-day basis, especially if you are just beginning your career in cybersecurity. And of course, if you want to contact us to know much about our training and what we do, you can either call or text on 301-377-1674, or you can just simply email podfabrice 2017 at gmail.com, or you can just go to K2 Cybertech or Team Bona as well, and you can contact us through the WhatsApp page right there. Of course, we are going to bring you more content, and it's our desire that this particular webinar, whenever you see it, will actually help you in making the right decision for your career. Have a wonderful day.